All right, so if you are new to me, I am Kelly Folsom. You could probably still hear, I still have a little throat action going on, so I apologize for that. It's about 30 days of this nonsense. I'm almost there. So the topic today is why your paintings look flat and how to fix it with light and shadow. So I recently taught a workshop at the Booth Art Museum in Georgia. And this really kind of stood out to me as the biggest issue that I saw most of the artists in the workshop struggling with. And I thought, wow, this is a perfect reminder. Sometimes those of us who kind of get to a more master level, we forget to touch on the fundamentals and forget, those just fundamental things that we can struggle with as, beginning or even intermediate artists. So that's the topic today, why your paintings are looking flat and how to fix it with light and shadow. If you're new to me, I've been an artist for 17 years. I'm the founder of the online school, the Art Life School. I've been teaching for, 13 of those 17 years. So without further ado, let's dive in. And I'm here doing what I love today, which is being with all of you and teaching and sharing what I've learned to my best ability with all of you. So thank you so much for being here and helping me to fulfill my life's purpose as a teacher as well as an artist. Okay, so do you ever feel like your paintings feel dull, lifeless, or just flat, even after hours at the easel? Who's ever felt that way? So today, that's what we're here to address, right? I'm going to be guiding you through the most common challenge that painters face, that I face myself, especially in those beginning days, and how to really truly see as an artist, because this is not your fault if you're struggling with this. We're not taught to see the world like artists see the world, right? So this is a skill set. This is a skill set that we train ourselves to be able to train our eyes and our mind and our nervous system to see the world as an artist and get that translation on the canvas. Okay, so here's what we're going to be talking about on this webinar. And we're going to be here for about an hour. And every now and then, I'm going to ask you to share with me what I just said in the chat. Okay, and I'm going to invite all of you and challenge all of you to really, really pay attention to everything that I'm sharing and saying. And one of the ways that you can really lock it in is to recall, right? And repeat what you think you just heard me say. Okay, so every now and then I'm going to ask you, what did you just hear me say? Type it in the chat, okay? So you make sure that you walk away with this more plugged in, okay? Instead of just passive listening. This is active, proactive listening today, all right? Because you're not here just for information, you are here for transformation. And that means you cannot sit back passively as a student. Okay. So we're going to be talking about why values are more important than color, number one, and how to get those values right. How to create strong light and form, even with a very simple subject. And the biggest mistake that does flatten your paintings and how to avoid that. And I'll share with you a step-by-step approach that you can use in the next painting that you're going to do. Let me get my little laser pointer here. Does that sound good? Everybody cool? Does that sound like a good deal? Okay, so that's my goal. So my goal is for you to walk away with these tools today to immediately improve your paintings. I went to 4 years of art school, got an art degree, and I would still get stumped on this stuff, even sometimes after all that training and all that learning. So just, keep that in mind. Try to be patient with yourself as you're growing and learning as an artist. And sometimes we're like, wait, didn't I already know how to do that? How did I forget? It happens. Okay, so in this session, we're going to cover the cheat sheet laws of light and shadow. I'll be showing you examples of good light versus bad light, good shadow work versus bad shadow work. I'm going to show you some actual examples of that. We'll have a short Q&A at the end for any other questions that you might have on this topic. of light and shadow and creating more three-dimensional form in your paintings. I do have a special gift for you at the end as well, just for attending this workshop, especially, you know, for those of you who are new to me and not in the Art Life School. Okay, does all that sound good? Everybody ready to rock and roll? Okay, awesome. So here's what I want to talk about first. Values come first. Color is secondary. This is probably the biggest thing that I see artists doing, is getting kind of obsessed with matching the color and not seeing the value. Okay, so match the value that you see first instead of the color. That is the main thing you want to focus on. So in paintings, right, values are what create that illusion of light and shadow, and also the illusion of space and depth in your picture. Okay, so you want to aim for a minimum of 3 values in your entire painting and on every single object. Okay, if you don't have 3 values on every object, that object's probably going to start looking a little flat, not dimensional. Okay, so paintings use fewer values than drawings do. The other issue that people can have is that they are using way too many values and trying to make way too many value gradations to create form. And I just have a simple example here to show you that every color has a value. And color can actually be quite deceptive. You know, it's actually really hard to see the value of a color until you really train your eye. And even then, sometimes once you train your eye, color can still fool us as artists. So here's a black and white image of this still life setup right here. And does anybody feel like, oh, I wouldn't have expected that rose to be that light in value, looking at the color image? Or maybe even the apples. So saturation of color always kind of makes us think that, oh, this is a lighter value. It makes us think that it's darker in value than what it is. Okay, so that's why you definitely want to start really looking at your setups and your paint palette, not just in color, but also in value. Okay, so this is really my biggest pro tip, and it is so simple, y'all. It's amazing how training ourselves, we don't need a bunch of complex things. We just need some simple tools to keep us from falling into those pitfalls. All right, so this is what I did, no joke, not kidding you. Did this every freaking day in the studio painting. I would take a photo of my painting. I would take a photo of the setup. I would turn them into black and white on my phone, you know, and it's not like rocket science, but I would do that and I would compare the two. And back then, of course, I didn't have the phone back in 2007, 8, the iPhones. But I had a little point and shoot camera, and it was even more work than it is now. Back then, so I would take the photo, I would go to the computer, download it, compare them side by side, see where I was off on my values. Okay, because values is literally the most important thing to get right first and foremost before you worry about color matching or color mixing. Okay, if you do this consistently in your studio practice, you will begin to see the values. Okay, so it really is just a matter of training yourself. You can see here how every color has a value in black and white. So values is really, if you're not familiar with the art term value, it's really just the degree of lightness or darkness of the color. Okay. And sometimes this seems so basic that we overlook it. We're like, oh, it can't be that simple. You know, it's got to be harder than this. Well, it is hard. It's actually not easy to see the values, but it's very simple to see them and to focus just on the value first. Does this make sense? Okay, let me know what you just heard me say in the chat. What's the big takeaway from what I just shared? All right. And the point of using this simple tool of using your camera and comparing the color to the black and white image is not that you're trying to perfectly match every value perfectly, but that you're getting the main values on point, that you're not like way off in the weeds on your values, okay? All right. All right, Ruth says, train yourself to see the values first, color second. Yes. Lucy says values more important than color. Values are the most important. Okay, winner, winner, chicken dinner, A+. All right, thank you for playing along. And thank you for doing that for yourself, because that's really who it's for, is for you. All right, so here we're going to look at the breakdown of value on a form. Okay, and this is kind of going to get into some of that art words, vocabulary, art speak, and the structure of light and shadow on any object. We have a very simple sphere here. So how to create strong light in form, even from a simple subject. Every single object that you paint is going to have this unless it's a transparent object. That's the only caveat to this. Transparent objects do not have form shadows. Okay, that's the only difference. And you're only ever painting a solid object or a transparent object. Is this sphere solid or transparent? Type in the chat. All right, so let's see. Solid, 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 solid. Yes. Okay, bingo. So you've already got the main skill set, which is to identify, is this a solid object or is it a translucent, transparent object? Right? Simple, simple, simple. But those really are the only two things you're ever painting. Okay, so every solid object has these, and if you're missing one of these, that's part of why your object is looking flat in your painting, because all of this is just an illusion, right? We're trying to create the illusion. It's all make-believe. It's all a magic trick. We're just trying to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on a 2D flat surface on a canvas. So every object must have a distinct shape of light, a distinct shape of form shadow, a highlight. Okay, so we have a distinct shape of light, distinct shape of form shadow, a highlight, okay, and a transition zone into the shadow that's not quite shadow yet, but it's not getting as much light. So there's always a part of the form that is turning away from your light source. Every object has a cast shadow underneath so that you do not have UFOs in your paintings, ungrounded floating objects, unless you're painting clouds, which are floating objects, okay? But every object that's, whether it's in a landscape or a still life, any object that is sitting down on the ground plane, the tabletop plane or ground plane, is going to have a cast shadow underneath. Okay, and the cast shadow is in the shape of the object, the whole object. Okay, and every object is going to have some amount of reflected light. Sometimes it's brighter and more and bigger, and sometimes it's softer and quieter and duller. It depends on the object. And so in between the end of the shadow or the cast shadow and the form shadow is where your reflected light will show up. Okay, is all this making sense so far? It's very simple, but easy to forget some of these things, especially while we're painting and we're just like, I don't know why this pear isn't looking right. I'm so frustrated, you know? And so we have to stop while we're painting when we come up against those blocks, those blind spots, and go back to these cheat sheets. So again, I'll send out the recording to this, but you can also take screenshots of this along the way if you want to save these slides and remind yourself of these rules. Okay, the biggest mistake, I would say, most people do pretty good whenever they're painting the light. But the biggest hang up for most artists are the shadows, the shadows. And I think there's a reason for this. And I think it's because normal people, non-artists, the lay person the human eye is actually not created to see darkness, to see in the dark. It's not created to see shadow. We're not nocturnal creatures, right? Like we're not little, what are nocturnal creatures? Like possums? What are the animals that can see in the dark really well? But that's not how our human eye is made. So our eye really focuses on light, right? Light and contrast and color. So I think that's a simple reason why bats, there we go, bats, thank you. Simple reason why shadow ends up being such a sticking point for us in the beginning as artists, and a lot of times not just in the beginning, for quite a while. Okay, so here's what makes a good shadow. We already talked about this, but you want a good shadow shape that describes the form. If your shadow shape is destroying the shape of the form, you're going to end up with a flat looking object. Okay, so how do we make a form shadow shape that describes the form? It simply mimics the side of the contour that it's closest to. Okay, and we'll go more in depth on this. But it's repetitive or mimics, whatever the word is that makes sense. So type in the chat what you just heard me say, because that is probably the most important thing to touch on. Okay, law of shadow. Shadows have to be darker in value than the light. Okay, to some degree. I would say usually it depends on the value structure of the whole painting, but it's got to be darker in value than the light. Okay, shadow mimics the shape. Good, good, good. All right, you guys are picking up what I'm laying down. I'm loving it. You're staying focused. I love it. Okay, shadow, typically you want shadow to take up less percentage of the object than the light. Why is that? That's because as human beings, we see by light, not by shadow. And we can create more illusion of three-dimensionality in painting by working in the light, not in the shadow. Okay. Light and shadow are opposites, like yin and yang. And so when we really want to keep this in mind whenever we're painting. All right, so it takes up less percentage. My favorite is like 2/3 light, 1/3 shadow. This is so much easier to create form and depth this way. Not to say that you can't ever paint backlight like a sunset or sunrise, or even like a backlit bouquet in a window. It can be done. It is just much, much more challenging to create three-dimensional form in those settings. So you want to really build your ability to create form in light first before you start trying to like tackle more difficult subject matters like backlight. Does that make sense? Okay. So the other thing is with shadow, another law is that it's typically less vibrant or colorful than the color that's in the light. So you want to take out some of that saturation whenever you're painting shadow. Why? Because the human eye likes to focus on color. And bright color really tantalizes our eyes, you know, reds and yellows and bright greens and bright hot pinks, you know, saturated color, bright colors really draw our eye to it. So we want to keep shadow quiet because that's the nature of how our human eye sees. We want to keep light more activated and more focus and more attention on the light. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing is details. Okay. Shadows, you want to keep shadows quiet, like I just said. So less detail work in the shadow. So you really want to think of light and shadow as opposites. Less impasto. This usually means less impasto or thick paint in the shadow, less, you know, brushwork in the shadow. It's really like that's the quiet. Shadow holds, light moves, right? So your light and your color is what moves the eye through the picture. And your shadow are the stops in the picture and the holds and like the pauses in music or the rests in music. Okay, so, and without the shadow, you have no movement, right? Without those rests, without those pauses in the picture, you have no movement, no direction in the picture. All right, so the other rule I want to mention is keep white out of your shadows. Maybe on a white object, you might get away with using a little bit of white, but try to make every shadow color without white. Why? Because white is the thickest, number one, it's the thickest pigment on your palette. It's the coolest and it's the most opaque. It has the most coverage. Okay, and we want to get that illusion of translucent, luminous shadows in our work. So keep white out of the equation in shadow colors. So I thought I would bring up a few examples of, quote unquote, bad shadows, which seems a little harsh, to go here, but, and some of these are better than others. So again, some of these artists are just almost hitting their marks and some are way off. All right, so I just pulled these, and actually a couple of these are from one of the free critiques I just did on my YouTube channel. So you can go and watch those and check those out. So here's what not to do in shadows, right? Bad shadows don't have any clear shadow shape. Some of these have clear shadow shapes on some of them and are missing on other forms. So you want to have a clear shadow shape on every object. This pair here doesn't really have a shadow shape at all. Okay, so while they've got the drawing right, they've got the color, right, there's no shadow. There's no light and shadow. So that is going to flatten it out. So although there's other things that they're doing to start to create form that's working, it's still falling a little bit flat because they don't have a shadow shape. Okay. If your shadow shape goes against the form, which I don't think we have any examples here, but I'll show you another example on the next slide, that will also flatten your form. Okay, bad shadows are the same value or too similar in value to the light shape. This artist here, they've got the shadow shapes. Look, they're seeing them, right? But they don't have enough contrast between their light and their shadow. This person here has much better contrast and a much better shape. Their shape, they kind of lose a shape down here. So they're not getting it all the way, but very, very close here. The one on the bottom right, I would say, is closest. This one, they're seeing it, they're getting them in, but the value of their shadows are way too similar to the value of their lights. Can everybody see this? It's so much easier to see it in somebody else's work than our own, right? Okay. Let me know in the chat what you just heard me say about the value of the shadows. Okay, a shadow that cuts the object in half. I don't really have an example of that here, but I think on the next slide. Doing half and half light, half shadow, that's no bueno. Just stay away from that. Make sure your light source is angled where you at least have, more of a 2/3, 1/3. If we think in threes, we're usually going to be pretty successful in art. Okay, awesome. All right. Shadow value can't be too similar to the shape to the light. But okay, value always darker in shadow, no white. Value of the shadow must have enough contrast. Perfect. Yes, people are seeing it. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and then this artist here on bottom right, they're seeing, it's like you can see that they're getting it, but they're not doing it consistently enough on every object throughout the whole painting. Okay, so in some places it's working, it's stronger, in other places it's falling apart. Okay, another no-no, bad shadows, right, is, remember I talked about this, right? Like it's just as vibrant, just as saturated and colorful as what's in the light. So this person here, while we have a value change on the shadow shape of this lemon, there is like so much bright color in the shadow that we're paying attention to both the light and the shadow. Does that make sense? So you want to keep the viewers focused on the light because that's the nature of how our human eye sees. You want less focus and attention on the shadow. You can see they're nailing it on the tabletop plane, right? There's more detail, there's more color and saturation, there's more, pattern and texture in the light and less in the shadow. But on the lemon, they're painting all this bright color in the shadow on the lemon. This person here is changing the value by going to a dark green, which I would not recommend doing on a lemon because it can make a lemon look like it's old and moldy and rotting. Okay, but so they're getting a value change. They've kind of got a shadow shape in here, but the color is so different from the lemon, and it's so saturated that once again, we're looking at both the light and the shadow. Is this clicking for anybody? Let me know. Let me know in the chat if this is like clicking in. Okay, another no would be, some of these are more important. I would say all the ones I've already named are more important than some of these other ones. No temperature change to the light. So if you're doing cool light, you want warmer shadows, right? Here, you're doing cool light, and then she has a cool shadow. Okay, it's a very blue, she got a lot of blue, a lot of gray in her shadow. Okay, so you want temperature contrast between your lights and your shadows. If you're painting plein air, outdoors, warm light from the sunlight, if it's a sunny day, then you want to have cooler shadows to contrast. So basically, you're looking for contrast between light and shadow. Okay, same or more details than the light shape. That makes a bad shadow. Bad shadow. Bad. Right? Okay. But this is important too, because sometimes when we're painting from life, we're seeing all the detail. And then we go to paint the shadows, and we start copying all the details that we see in the shadow. Why? Because our eye is a focusing device. So when you go with, let's say if you're painting this object and you're painting the light, and then you move to the shadow and you start focusing your eye on the shadow of this lemon, all of the details are going to be jumping out at you, and you're going to be putting in every little bump and wrinkle in and every little value change that you think that you're seeing in the shadows. Okay, but you're not seeing the whole picture in proper context whenever you're doing that. So when you paint shadows, my recommendation, besides using the basic tool of your camera and turning both images into black and white, would be to, when you paint shadow, focus your eye on the light, not the shadow. See the shadow in your peripheral vision, in that soft focus. Okay, because you want the focus to be on the light. The more you start copying what you're seeing by focusing within the shadow, you're going to make some of these mistakes because color is going to seem brighter. You're also not comparing it to the light whenever you're doing that. So you're making color judgments, value judgments, detail judgments out of context with the light. Does that make sense? So my key tip there, if you're falling into some of these traps, is try to paint the shadow while looking at the light, not the shadow. I know that can be tricky, but it's good practice. Okay, so less details in the shadows. If you have more, you're in bad shape. All right, reflections, getting reflections or reflections that are too bright or too light in value are also very sharp edged. Reflections belong to the shadow, everybody. What did you hear me just say? Type it in the chat. This person's reflections are working pretty well. They're softer, more diffused. She's, the value and the color is a little bit duller. So like I say, this piece down here on the bottom right is pretty close, pretty close to getting to be on point. These reflections here, it's hitting that danger zone of too hard edge, too bright in color. So that goes for also if you're doing reflections on metal, make sure that reflection follows the rules of shadow because reflections belong to the shadows. Good, you guys are Great, perfect. Okay, moving on. These are some examples. I pulled these from some of you guys know, some of you know, one of my teachers that I studied with is Greg Kreutz. And this is taken from Greg's book, Oil Painting Essentials. You can get that on Amazon if you don't have it yet. Both of his books are excellent, but I do want to give credit to Greg because these are examples of his, of bad shadow versus good shadow. Some of these are so extreme that it's like nobody would ever do that, you know? But some of them are like, I see this happen a lot when I'm teaching painting workshops where there's no shadow at all or very minimal shadow, and the color is too close and the value is too close. I would say I don't ever really see this happen where the color is way, way off. Mostly what I see is not enough contrast between light and shadow when I'm working with people. I will see this happen sometimes because sometimes shadow shapes do get a little weird. Okay. So simplifying the shadow shapes and making sure that your shape is most importantly describing the form and certainly not cutting against the form. So sometimes weird shadows are happening, or maybe there's some oddities in the fruit or the tree or whatnot. So really simplifying those shadows. This is another example I found online, and this is on an educational site. I was in shock. Somebody who is teaching is using this as a teaching example of what to do. It's not good. Okay, so be careful out there. Some of the things that you might be reading, free advice online is not always a good thing. So these shadows here, while there is a value contrast and practicing painting in black and white can be really helpful as well to really building your skill set in painting and value. But this shape, what's wrong with it? Somebody tell me in the chat. What's wrong with this shape? Why is this shape not working? This shape is a little bit better. Doesn't follow the form. Curved the wrong way. And percentages are equal. Yay, Lucy! Not following the form. Doesn't follow the form, Mary Bragman says. Yes. Curved the wrong way. Shape doesn't follow the form. Yes, and I agree with Lucy. It's almost half and half, right? So anyways, okay, I think everyone's getting this. Yay. I'm excited. Let me know if you're not getting it. You're like, what, Kelly? You speak in an alien language today. Okay, let's talk about good lights. It's really just the opposite, you guys. Light and shadow, you just want to think in terms of opposites. But you can go through these lists if you're having a problem with one of your paintings and see, like, am I doing these things? Okay, so good lights have clean color and sharper edge on the lit side, the light facing side of the form. So look to see where your light source is coming from. Is it up above? You can tell in this painting, the light is coming from top left. So you have to have a clean enough shape of light and somewhat of a sharper edge on that top lit facing edge, okay? Thicker paint in the lights because it's lit. You don't want the light hitting your painting, passing through the paint like watercolor with oil painting. Oil painting is different from watercolor. Okay, so you're not using the white of the paper as you would use in watercolor when you're doing oil paint. So with oil paint or acrylic, you're using opacity and coverage of the surface to build that illusion of light. Okay, so thicker paint to cover the surface, to have it look lighter in value, to have it look colorful as well. If your paint is too thin in the light, it's not going to look lit up. So you want thinner paint in the shadows, thicker paint in the lights. Highlight placement. Where are you putting your highlight? One highlight only, please. If you are painting multiple highlights on an object, you know that something is wrong. Okay? You may have too many light sources in your studio. You may have overheads as well as a spotlight, or maybe you have a window coming in and you're seeing too many highlights on your objects. Try to get your light, and I'll go over some tips for lighting at the end. Try to get your light situation under control in your studio so that you only see one highlight. Okay, so the highlight's job is to create a focal point on the inside of the form, away from the shadow and away from that starting contour edge, to create the illusion of three-dimensionality. So that's a main job of the highlight and details. It's to create a focal point on the interior of the form. No-nos for highlights are too close to the lit edge, not pulling the eye in enough towards the center, or too close to the shadow. Okay, so you don't want to place your light where it's fully frontal. You don't want to place your light too far to either side, right? Okay, excuse me, sorry. The highlight washes out the local color, and sharpness of the edge of the highlight will describe the texture of the object. Okay, so the shinier, harder edge the object is, that means the shinier the object is that you're painting. Okay, peaches absorb more light than apples, or even oranges or nectarines. Metal reflects more light back to our eye. Metal, bronze, glass, porcelain reflects more light back to our eye than, say, terracotta or an unglazed stone. Okay, so let me know something in the chat that stuck with you about highlight. What's one rule of highlights out of all of them that I just mentioned? Let me know, let me know. I will send out a recording, Christine. I won't send out a copy of the slides, but I will send out the recording. And you can do screenshots or whatever you need to do. One highlight per object. Metals reflect more light. Highlight not too close to the edge of the object. Awesome. Not too close to shadow, and only one highlight. Only one highlight. Okay, yes, perfect. You guys are getting it. You're still here with me. Awesome. I love that you're here with me. And I love it for you that you're here and staying focused. In this world of distraction, it's a skill to stay focused. All right, brushwork describes the form in the light. That's something else to keep in mind. In that transition zone, away from the lit edge, and when it's getting closer to shadow, that's when the color might get a little bit darker in value, very subtle, but a little bit darker in value, and maybe a little bit duller or a little bit warmer, depending on the object, closer to shadow. That's, I call that the tricky transition zone because you want the eye to start to get more diffused as you get close to shadow. Okay, so softer edges where the object is turning away from the light source. So you might have a sharper edge up here, and then your edge gets a little softer and more diffused to the eye where the form is turning under or away from your light source. Same thing on this side. If you were to split this object in half, we know that the light is on the left side, shadow is on the right side. Why? Because the front part of this form is jutting out into space, and then it's wrapping and turning around. It's rounding away from the light source. Okay, so that's why we lose some effect of light, but even before we get into shadow. All right. Here is an example. One of the main things I would recommend is start how you want to finish. Set up your values first, okay? And then stick to your values as you go into color. So if you want to get more success with your value, start with value. If you want to train yourself to get better shadow shapes, start with your shadow shapes first. Okay, so here is a step-by-step example, and you can, if you're not in Art Life School, you can get this for free through my oil painting for beginners class or the 5-day challenge, or you can also just sign up just for this tutorial, which has more of the steps and explanation of the steps. And I'll give you the link for that at the end. So first step is you want to tone your board and canvas. This helps with values because everything looks way too dark on white. Okay, so you want to get some sort of tone. And if your painting is darker in value, you know you want your painting to be maybe chiaroscuro at the end, you're going to tone darker. If you know that you want your painting to be lighter in value at the end, I recommend toning lighter. Do not paint on a stark white canvas would be my first very basic practical tip with helping you to control your values. Paint your values first, okay? If you paint on a white canvas or too light of a tone, I would say even this is kind of too light of a tone. I can do that because I know what I'm doing. Now, you know, I know the full range of value. Like it's just like in my DNA, in my nervous system now because of painting for 17 years and building this skill set. So I can paint on stark white successfully because I know what to avoid. I know how dark to go, you know, in things or how light to go. Does that make sense? But in the beginning, I didn't. And so toning, these steps are really important. So toning your canvas, not too dark, not too light, somewhere in the middle is what I would recommend if you don't know what value to tone with. You're going to use an umber and a medium, something simple like a raw umber or a burnt umber and some medium. Because in oil paint, we build from thin to thick, right? And we paint from dark to light. So you have to get your darks in first, thinner, but dark enough before you start to paint in the lights. That's just the process of oil painting. Okay, so paint those values first. Okay, with that same umber, don't get into color yet. Fight the temptation to start mixing color, okay? Don't mix color yet. Just have a neutral color and try to nail the value that you're seeing regardless of the color. And I would say err on the side of starting your shadows too dark. You will most likely naturally lighten them as you progress through the painting. And you'll probably add more color and they're going to get lighter and lighter. So if you know that you have fallen into this pitfall, start your shadows darker than what you think you might need. Place those shadow shapes. In the beginning, you have to really think step by step and very consciously before it becomes natural. Right? Like nothing is natural in the beginning with any of this. It's like maybe learning to play the piano and you're like, oh, where's that key? My pinky doesn't want to quite reach over there. And I have to remember what's the name of that key and where's that key at, you know? So it's you have to be very conscious in the beginning of each of these steps. So describe your shadow shapes right away, thinking about the rules. You're describing the form, mimicking that side of the contour that you're closest to, okay? And keep it flat in the beginning. Okay, so here, I don't even start with shadow colors yet. I just get the flat shape of the shadow and it's not the right color and it's way too dark. That's fine. Very, very hard to determine if the shadow color is the most ambiguous color and value in the whole painting. It stands to reason that it's going to be harder for you to mix that color and value out of context to the light. So you want to paint your lights first after you set in your shadow shapes. That will set you up for the proper relationship between light and shadow. So once you get in your shadow shapes, your cast shadows, any darks, like if the grapes are pretty much a total dark or a dark wood table, set all your darks in the beginning because we work from dark to light. Once you get in those shadow shapes, then paint your lights first, okay, so that you can more accurately relate the shadow colors to the light. Okay, type in the chat what you just heard me say. One of these first three things. What did you just hear me say in your words? Like what landed? for you on that. Are you still with me? You still with me? I know this is a lot. This is everything. This is everything. Okay. Let me change this. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Okay, send it to the whole group, not just to me. All right, shadow mask first, then the lights, painting the flat shadow shapes first. Darks first, then the lights. Good, good, good. Still here absorbing. Yay, Lynn. Awesome. Good job. Good job, everybody. Oil paint is applied from thin to thick, dark to light. Okay, perfect, 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 perfect. Okay, and we'll get to Q&A at the end here. So we're getting close to the end, so hang with me. All right, when you set those shadows, try to hold pretty true to those shadows throughout the rest of the painting. Only making adjustments when you really feel like, yeah, I need to change that value some, okay? Another tip is to mix and load your paint correctly. This is a biggie, a biggie. Brush handling, I see it all the time. In the workshop I was just in Georgia, almost everybody was struggling with this. Like, Kelly, I can't get the shadow dark enough, or I can't get the color looking vibrant enough or rich enough in the light. And it's because you're not loading the paint correctly or mixing. If you're mixing paint with your brush, you're also not mixing the paint correctly with your brush. So when you're painting in the light, you want to slow down. You want to mix maybe in a smaller pile. You want to, what I call shovel load, whenever you're ready to apply the paint, so that all that paint is on the tip of your brush, not inside the hairs of the brush. Okay. You want the paint more inside the hairs of the brush whenever you're painting in this thinner background, or whenever you're painting in thinner shadows. So you even change how you load the brush, determining whether you're painting light or you're painting shadow. In the lights, also, if you want to really go for maximum impasto and focal point, you can use a palette knife. Right? So using a palette knife, or maybe even just picking up a thick piece of paint for a sharp highlight on a grape with like the back of your brush, or a wooden skewer, or even a toothpick if you're painting a small enough painting. Keep thinner out of your lights, please. So thinners, literally thin oil paint, mineral spirits is what I'm talking about. Terpenoid, Gamsol. Use that more to clean your brush. But I would say use very, very little of it in any of your painting. It will also weaken the paint film, even in your shadows, okay? So in the beginning, I would say really try to stay away from paint thinner whenever you're learning, so that your paint doesn't get the oil doesn't get cut out of your oil paint if you're using oil paint. Okay, that's what thinner is for, right? Is to cut the oil, to pull the oil out. So sometimes if your paintings are looking super dry and crusty, it's probably because you're painting with way too much thinner. Okay. Here are some final studio suggestions for lighting. And if you want the whole material list and you're not an Art Life School member, please do yourself a favor and go and grab the Oil Painting for Beginners Masterclass on the website. It's a $500 value. You can get that absolutely for free. Okay, my gift to you. And it's on artlifewithkelly.com. And I'll give you the whole material list, as well as like 4 or 5 very in-depth videos about materials and supplies and how to light. If you're setting up your own still life setup, how to properly light. But here we'll go through some studio suggestions for this. Again, you want to avoid multiple light sources in your studio. So if you have 3 highlights on your fruit, then you have a major issue, especially if you're going to copy all those highlights. So you want to get 1 spotlight is preferred. I like to angle it at my setup, and I've got the same light that's on my setup and on my painting and on my palette. And I like to sit close enough to my setup so that I can see what I'm looking at. And so the same light source is hitting everything, okay? Angle your light so that 2/3 of the form is in light, 1/3 in shadow. You can angle it from the right or from the left. Try to avoid full frontal light because that tends to flatten out the form automatically. Avoid backlight as well is what I would recommend in the beginning. Try not to paint with too strong of light on your canvas. So there's kind of a fine line between having too much light and not enough light on your canvas. So try to get in that middle zone. If you have too much light on your canvas, everything is going to come out too dark. If you're painting in too much darkness or too much shadow in your studio, everything's probably going to come out way too light in value. But just try to make sure, you know, you get somewhere in that Goldilocks. It's just the right amount of light. People who paint at night, sometimes they use a spotlight over top of on their easel, maybe a clamp light, and it's way too high in wattage, and it just ruins their paintings. So if you're painting at night, try to get a better quality light like this if you can. And maybe not full like 100 watts or whatever. This also ensures that you have the same temperature of light source hitting your still life, your palette, in your painting. That's the other thing. You don't want like a warm light on your easel and a cool light on your still life setup. Okay, so that's really going to mess you up as well. So if you get in the habit of using one light, that'll ensure most success with your lighting. And, you know, you can either stack boxes, or this is like a table I took the legs off of, have that stacked. And then I also, nowadays, what I really prefer is using a speaker stand or a sculpture stand. Again, that'll be on the material list on the oil painting for beginners. And of course, Artlist School members, that's on your material list. Another way you can, you know, control your light is to get a simple trifold light and shadow board. Okay, so this will keep too much reflected light from coming into your form shadows if you have white walls. And if you want to utilize like a cast shadow in your painting, this will also create a really nice cast shadow. And you can open this up if you don't like that cast shadow. The closer in you close in these black sides, these are just simple. These are like $5. You know, kids use them for science projects, presentations, things like that. So that will also help just to ensure that you don't have too much light in your studio washing out your shadow shapes. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's get into some questions. We have a few minutes here before we go. Does anybody have any questions for me? Let's see. And then I'm gonna, never thought about loading the brush differently in lights versus shadows. Great tip. Okay. Why use medium light? Because and that's specifically for your panel. Okay, for your canvas, for your panel. If you have too much light, has anybody ever painted plein air without an umbrella on a hot sunny day? And then you think your painting is looking great, and you get it home and you get it indoors and it's like way too dark. You know, this is way too dark, and all the lights, which I thought looked really warm. Why? Because you're painting under warm, hot sunshine light when you're painting outdoors. So all the colors are being impacted by the temperature of that light source, which is why plein air artists, you'll often see them painting in the shade, or you'll see them painting with an umbrella over their easel to control that quality of light. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Ruth says, before today I ruined a zillion brushes loading paint improperly. Yes. Good. Brush loading, thick versus thin. Awesome. Good. I'm so glad that some of the setup values first. Rosalba says, always tone the canvas, paint flat first. Yes. Even in the light, you know, try to paint thickly, but paint flatly in the light. Okay. All right. Could you give an example of temperature, light and shadow? Sure. Let me share my screen again. Better to paint from panel or canvas for light. I'll check it here in a minute. So Let's go back. Oh, I have to present. Okay. Yes. So again, you want cooler light, which typically just means more white. Okay. If you're painting indoor still life, most of the time it's going to be cool light, warmer shadows, unless you're specifically changing it based on your liking or based on your taste. But that's what this is here. So cooler light, which means more white. White is the coolest color on your palette. Okay. Warmer shadows. You may have an object that the local color is a warm color. Okay. So it's not like every object has to be cool in the light. Add more blue, add more blue. No, it's just that the contrast between light and shadow needs to have some temperature change. All right, so in this case, you know, it's warmer tones that are in the shadow, less white, more, you know, umbers or cadmiums. You know, one combo I love to use in shadows on a lot of objects is ivory black plus cad red light plus cad yellow deep. And that's what I use primarily on most objects, unless it's a super black object. And then I just adjust how much yellow or red that I put in there. And the cadmiums give a nice warmth and a nice glow to those shadows because they do have some opacity. So it will lighten the value, but they're very hot, very warm. So they're going to keep those shadows warmer. Okay, so that's a very subtle thing. But you can see a big difference between, say, light and shadow work in these pieces here versus here, right? So when you see it, you know it, like, oh, she's doing cool and cool. You know, or perhaps in her lights here, the lemon color is not vibrant enough. It's getting a little muddy, it's getting a little warm, it's getting a little thin. The light shape is too similar to the shadow. Okay, so the relationship is off there between light and shadow in a number of different ways. Very subtle ways, but in a number of ways, she's missing the mark there. Okay, so here you can see it. They're doing cool, cool, and cool. He's got a little bit of yellow in here, which is helping a little bit. It's just not quite there. You know, it's mostly the value is off. And not putting in a strong enough form shadow. There's no form shadow here. The core shadow, where the shadow starts. You know, if we go back to that simple sphere, you know, you want to have, yes, you want it to get kind of soft and diffuse, but you can't lose the boundary between light and shadow. There has to be a clear enough distinction between this is where the light ends and this is where the shadow begins. Okay, so that's another big one. If you're painting your light too much into your shadow, it's going to flatten out. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. Yay, I'm so glad you've learned so much, Margaret. Awesome, awesome. Okay, perfect. Green trees outdoors. What color should the reflection on water be? Yeah, so if it's sunny outside, you will have blue reflected, okay, in your shadows. If it's overcast outside, it's different. It's like cool, light, warm shadows. Okay, so you have to pay attention to the temperature of the light source that you are painting. Awesome questions, everybody. Thank you so much for like playing full out. I do want to make sure everybody gets the link for Art Life School today. And if you're unaware of what's included in Art Life School, it's an amazing package. And with that includes, gosh, hundreds and hundreds of video tutorials, step by step. You get new instructional videos every single month. I put out 3 of those new 30-minute lessons every month. So they're short and sweet. You get every painting masterclass I've ever created. And I'm always adding to that. There's other courses, business courses, finding your artistic voice course. These I sold at $1,000 each, right? Those are all included inside your library whenever you sign up for Art Life School. You know, regular feedback in the community and support in the community, which is incredible. So And then also, I give artists permission to sell their lesson paintings. You know, I want you to build your success as an artist. So if you want to sell your lesson paintings, you get the rights, your own rights to your own paintings. That just helps you continue to grow and continue to, you know, invest in your art education. We have a monthly group critique on independent paintings. Okay, for those of you who want to begin to grow in your own concepts and do your own work. That's once a month. We have an accountability challenge and giveaways every month. Okay, I don't think Hedda's here today, but these are just some of the things that people are saying, and we have Art Life School members here. So Art Life School members, you're welcome to share in the chat what you love about it. What's the biggest thing that you love about Art Life School? So Hedda says, Kelly's online classes are the missing link between reading instructions or watching videos like this one, like you guys came to, reading books, watching endless videos on YouTube, or looking up other artists for inspiration. Her videos are short and easy to follow, informative, but not overwhelming. And the community she created is very friendly, supportive. Everything about it is just right. I love that. Okay, so if you are new or you want to rejoin Art Life School, if you've been a member before, or you want to join for the first time, you're invited to do so. And I will put the link in the chat. Let me grab that right quick for you guys if you want to go check it out. If I can figure out how to do that. Oh, stop share. Okay, let me grab that right quick for you, because I know I've got it on the slide, but this way you can click it. And because you are at this webinar, because you showed up and you played full out, if you do decide to sign up today in the next 24 hours, I will also mail you a signed copy of my book, 30 Ways to Master Still Life Painting. Okay, so that's only good for 24 hours. So that'll go away tomorrow. We'll send out a follow-up email of the replay of this teaching and have the link in there for you for Art Life School as well. But I will hand mail this book to you and sign it to you. So, you know, as I mentioned, I went to go to art school and get my bachelor's. The average cost of a bachelor's degree is $40,000 to $100,000. I will tell you, I paid $100,000 for mine, okay, and more, and then some. And so my goal, my passion, my mission is really to basically take everything that I've learned and everything that I've built and help you, right? And serve you and support you and help you grow, because I know not everybody wants to go back to school. Why would you? I don't think a BFA is even worth it, honestly. And I'm still paying mine off after all these years. So, but that really is the value of the content that is inside the Art Life School. You know, it's well over worth $100,000, $35,000. The quality of the education is well worth that price. Okay, so and you know, if you've been away from your art, I want you to think about that. You know, why? Why is that? You know, when is the time that you're going to really commit and say yes? Say yes to yourself and say yes to your artwork. So there's two different ways that you can sign up. It's a monthly subscription. You can sign up month to month for $97 and get everything. We also have monthly live virtual workshops inside the group. And we tend to like to have fun with those, do different subjects. This next month, May 9th, it's going to be on spring landscapes. So in those demonstrations are a bit longer. They're an hour and a half. And then we have a Q&A the following Monday or support call. We have a support call every month for artists in via Zoom, where you can come on live via Zoom. Okay. And again, you can choose to sign up for the monthly. If you're not sure, if you want to try it out and see if it's for you. And you do get a bit of a better price break if you sign up for annual. Okay, so annual is $9.97 for the year, so that does save you a couple $100. It would also, for those of you who are really interested and staying accountable and, not falling off the wagon throughout the year. If you're really interested in committing, this is the one I would recommend. So whenever you make a bigger investment, whenever you commit more time, you make a bigger decision, you're more likely, as we know, to stick with it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, everybody. Let me just check the chat before we go. I'm so thankful that all of you were able to be here today and show up for yourself. I hope that you really take these tips and run with them and take action, right? And yes, the Art Life School is for if you are a total beginner or if you consider yourself a professional, so it really is for all levels. Awesome. You're so welcome. Rena says it's not just for beginners. The content is really for artists at every stage of their development. Yes. Thank you, Arena. Yeah, and Arena is one that has definitely grown. There's been several people who have grown from a more early beginning state to, like, wow, now I'm selling my paintings and I'm showing my work, and I'm even winning awards, and so you may not think right now that you have those ambitions, but maybe, do you? You might. You may not even think that those kinds of things are possible for you, or you might think it's too late. Oh, I've tried this before and it hasn't stuck, things like that. I think a lot of artists who have joined have been amazed at the growth that they've experienced and the progress that they've made. And yeah, and again, I can't say enough about the community. Everybody is just we're all in there cheering each other on. Everybody is so supportive of one another, answering questions, sharing struggles, sharing experiences, helping each other. It's really just an incredible place to be. All right, you're so welcome, Lynn. Okay. Lucy says the support and coaching on the mental side of leading an art life was and is huge for me. Yeah. Yeah, because we know, like, really committing to any practice, building new habits, building a new identity for yourself as an artist is challenging. Just stepping into that, embracing that, embodying that, pursuing that, it's not easy to do that on your own. So a lot of people try to go it alone, and it's very, very hard to make it that way. So getting good instruction, good education, getting a mentor, getting, a teacher, somebody, my goal is to not just to feed you information, but to help you have transformation, right? So that's why I do the monthly live Q&As and support calls, to help you if you're having blocks in your development, if you're getting into ruts in your painting, having emotional, mental fitness around building those strong habits in your creative practice. So that's what that is for. And not everybody out there is both a good teacher and a good mentor and coach. Okay, so I am grateful that I have all of those gifts and I have nurtured all of those gifts and continue to do so, both for myself, really mostly for myself, selfishly in the beginning, and then, of course, and then I pass it on to everybody. Thank you, Rena. Yeah, and all the business courses too, if you are interested in growing and building an art career or an art business, whatever word makes sense to you. On that. So that would be anything from, learning how to start selling your paintings online or in person, entering art shows, all that kind of stuff. So, all right, everybody, so good to see all of you. You are so, so welcome. And if you're thinking about signing up for Art Life School, but you have questions, just send us a question at info@artlifewithkelly.com. if you do have questions about it and how it works further. And I'm happy to answer those questions for you. All right, everyone, I'm wishing you all happy painting. Have a fantastic day. You're so welcome. Bye.